Should we start?
Yes, we can start, Sucheta madam.
Yeah, okay. So, for this,
Hello. Hello.
yeah. Should I
Hi.
start, Deepaji?
Yeah, Sucheta ji, can you hear me? Just a minute.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah,
We were
sorry.
just making just 30 seconds. We are making it live on the YouTube. I'll
Okay.
just go in 30 seconds and we'll just start. So just another 30 seconds.
Yeah, perfectly fine. No problem.
Huh.
Okay. So, impact of tariffs in India. Shri Sumit Kumar, Principal Additional DG, DGTS Mumbai Zonal Unit. Dr. Praveen Kumar, Joint DGFT Mumbai and Nagpur. My co-panelists from Grant Thornton, Bharat, and the industry. FICCI members and representatives of the trade and businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. On behalf of FICCI, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to the webinar on impact of tariffs on India, US business and sectoral trade partnership. This webinar is being organized by Directorate General of Taxpayer Services Mumbai, Zonal Unit, in collaboration with FICCI and supported by Grant Thornton Bharat. We are delighted to have with us Sri Sumit Kumar, IRS, Principal Additional Director General DGTS, Mumbai Zonal Unit, and our guest of honor and Dr. Praveen Kumar, Joint DGFT, Mumbai and Nagpur. I also welcome our esteemed speakers from Grant Thornton Bharat, an industry who will share their perspectives on the theme of today's webinar. FICCI has remained actively engaged in the policy advocacy and trade promotion in both at the center as well as the states for many years now. FICCI, through its various activities, including conferences, capacity building activities, sectoral reports, etc., have constantly supported the development of industry and trade globally. We thank DGTS Mumbai Zonal Unit for collaborating with FICCI for organizing this webinar with the support of our esteemed partner, Grant Thornton Bharat. As you all are aware, global economy is on a reset with tariff walls being erected. When countries like China, Taiwan, Korean, and ASEAN economies were growing, the open global environment enabled these countries to grow rapidly and raise their per capita income sharply. However, by the time India began its growth trajectory, the global environment has changed considerably. And we will now have to grow rather in a rather closed environment where tariff and no tariff barriers are being erected constantly by major economies. On April 2nd, the United States announced the imposition of reciprocal tariffs on all its trading partners, including India. This marks the beginning of another era in global trade policy, what many are calling the early stage of a new trade war. Although the implementation of tariff announcement by US has been deferred by 90 days and will be applicable from 9th of July, the move has added uncertainty into international trade dynamics and amplified global market volatility. Given these uncertainties, the exact impact on trade is difficult to ascertain. Businesses around the globe are expected to see some disruptions in their supply chains. While some sectors are going to be severely impacted, and some other sectors may have an opportunity to expand their market share on the back of relative tariff advantage. India has taken a proactive approach by engaging early in the bilateral trade agreement BTA negotiations with the US. We are hopeful that an early tranche of BTA will be announced soon, and then it will be provide a reprieve to Indian exporters from the reciprocal tariffs. Under such a scenario, India will stand to benefit. From the industry perspective, FICCI has recommended that the BTA must ensure zero tariffs on sectors critical to India's interests, while cautiously opening areas without compromising on national priorities. We will have to wait and see how the negotiations progress and when India and US will have a successful trade deal. In today's webinar, our deliberations will move around the preparedness of Indian industry to address any adverse implications of both tariff and non-tariff barriers and further measure and support required from the measures and support required from the government to create complete competitiveness and resilient supply chains. I also request expert panelists and industry participants to share their ideas and suggestions to further strengthen India's export. With these words, I again welcome you all to the webinar and hope that today's discussion will provide valuable clarity and direction for businesses navigating their new policy environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Sucheta ji, for setting that tone for the webinar, today with your welcome address. I would now like to invite Shri Sumit Kumar ji for his opening, remarks. Mr. Kumar is a distinguished 1994 batch Indian Revenue Service officer, and he has done field posting in CGST, Customs Preventive, and before this posting, he was in CGST Mumbai and Customs, Kerala. So may I invite Mr. Sumit Kumar for his opening remarks?
Thank you so much. Very good afternoon to all the participants. I'm honored to extend a very warm welcome to Dr. Praveen Kumar, Joint DGFT Mumbai, Shri Deepak Mukhi, Head Maharashtra State Council FICCI, Dr. Bhattacharji, Founder and President of Center for Digital Economy Policy, all the partners of Grand Thought in Bharat, and all the representatives of trade who are participating in this event. I intensely appreciate the support and cooperation extended to DGTS by Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry. The association has played a pivotal role in accelerating genuine grievance redressal and taxpayer education at appropriate levels, enabling us in the government to address and redress the problems of the taxpayers. The role of trade associations in shaping and scaling up Indian economy is indisputable. I'd like to mention that we in DGTS are part of Ministry of Finance, Department of Revenue. We are headquartered in New Delhi and we have 6 zonal units. This Mumbai zonal unit caters to the states of Maharashtra and Goa. The mandate is to reach the taxpayers, taxpayer associations, trade groups, to create awareness about the changes in laws, rules, and procedures regarding indirect taxation, customs, and GST. Also to redress the grievances and clarify the doubts arising in the taxpayers. It is our constant endeavor to bring in current and relevant topics, thereby facilitating trade importers, exporters, by enriching their knowledge, enabling them to become aware of the changes in procedures and policy, and enhance the duty compliance. Several need-based events, including webinars and in the hybrid mode, have been conducted in the past by our zonal unit by taking constant and regular input from the trade and industry. And today's event is one such important topic of impact of tariffs on India-US business and sectoral trade partnership. I welcome all the participants and panelists to this event. The purpose of the discussion is to educate and inform the taxpayers, facilitate a deeper understanding of the upcoming economic policies and trade policies, explore potential opportunities amidst all the challenges. Our objective is to analyze, prepare, and position ourselves strategically for the impact. We are not here to discuss any final solutions, since the negotiations are still underway and the policy is being considered. However, we should approach this event with a positive and open attitude. The government is working diligently to promote the country's interest. And instead of being apprehensive about the unknown, we should focus on identifying very effective ways to grow our business, trade, and expand into new markets. Government will very much like to have feedback of all the issues which the trade thinks government can address, both tariff, non-tariff, and also the procedures they face for exporting. Today's discussion will enable us to first understand the Indo-US trade corridor and macroeconomic implications of the proposed changes. grasp the US reciprocal tariff policy and its impact on trade, examine the supply chain implications, especially for MSMEs, and identify the plentiful opportunities and as also the risks. The event would showcase opportunities for MSMEs in the India-US trade partnership, provide insights on navigating risk associated with US tariffs, highlight how changes in tariff can create new opportunities for us. We would also very much appreciate feedback on all the aspects of both tariff and non-tariff issues which government can address. The event aims to inform and empower the audience to capitalize on the emerging opportunities in the Indo-US trade partnership. I wish all the best to all the participants. With these words, I welcome all you to this insightful webinar, and I hand over back to Mr. Shinde. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your views on what DGTS is doing and what we intend to achieve through today's webinar. Moving on to our next speaker, I would now like to invite Dr. Jayjeet Bhattacharya, founder and president of Center for Digital Economy Policy, to give us his perspective on India-US corridor and the macroeconomic perspective. Dr. Bhattacharya has over 24 years of work experience in the area of technology, innovation, strategy, and public policy. And we look forward to hearing his view on what's going on between the two countries and the trade tariff negotiation. Over to you, Dr. Bhattacharya.
Yeah, mute. Dr. You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Deepak. I'm very good afternoon to everyone. Actually, I've been working for 30 years, so I've crossed 30 years of work in the industry, Deepak. But having said that, coming back to the issue at hand, the economic relationship between India and US has been actually one of the fastest growing bilateral trade relationships globally. So we have had relationship that spans across goods, services, technology, investment, and as the recent reports have come out on goods in terms of movies, in terms of education. So it's a multifaceted economic relationship that India and US enjoys. As of last year, which is financial year FY25, we had $132 billion of trade between US and India. And that includes pharmaceuticals, textiles, gems, jewelry, IT services that India exported. And then US exported machinery, aircraft parts, electronics, agricultural products, and a lot of weapons, actually, which has helped us in the recent conflict. So there's been a lot of exports that have happened from US also. If you look at the numbers, US accounts for about 18% of India's total goods exports and 6.22% of its imports. Overall, that's about 10.73% of India's total merchandise trade, and that's what we do with US. We had also signed off for an agreement which is led by our Prime Minister, where we have committed to doubling the bilateral trade to $500 billion by 2030, which is trade in both services and merchandise together. And that's a very significant number, having $500 billion of trade. And we seem to be on track. And both countries have invested significantly in each other's markets. TCS has opened up offices in US, have hired a whole bunch of people. Companies like STL has put up manufacturing plants to manufacture fiber optic. Chemical companies have set up plants. Similarly, US has set up manufacturing plants of automobiles, the back-end capability centers. So it has been a very, very vibrant investment from both sides. It has led to job creation, innovation, cost reduction in both the economies, and a terrific amount of economic opportunities that have come up. Now, the issue that has really cropped up is where each of the governments believe, and more so from the US side, that somehow this trade is skewed towards one or the other. So the US believes that somehow the rules of engagement are skewed towards India. In fact, what India recorded as a trade surplus in FY 2025 was $44.4 billion in terms of goods and services, with the US. So that's what was the trade surplus that was officially recorded, where there was about $86.5 billion of goods export and $28.7 billion of services to the US, while we imported about $45.3 billion of goods and $25.5 billion of services. I'll not bore you with the numbers anymore. It's just to give you a visibility of what this entire trade deal is all about. At a $4 trillion, 10% of our economy is $400 billion. So when we say that trade with US will be $500 billion, that is roughly 10% of the US, of the Indian economy, and that's very, very significant. Now, the challenge is that when India believes that the trade surplus with US is $44.4 billion, the US believes that it's actually $100 billion. So as a first step, you would need to arrive at a common understanding of what are these numbers, what are we talking about? More importantly, if you look at the recent report by GTRI, it actually says that US is actually enjoying a trade surplus with India, because if we add things which are not really added during the trade calculations, which includes goods and services, it excludes things like education. Our children go to US and they study, and we pump in 15 to $20 billion every year. That is an import that is happening. We are importing education services. We are paying for it using forex, and money is flowing into US. Similarly, digital services. Every time you paid for advertisement on Google or pay to LinkedIn or whoever, that is an export going into from India from US into India. So we're importing these services and a payment is going in. Similarly, financial operations, intellectual property, arms, royalties, arms sales, and so on and so forth. So if you look at all of that, US is actually seemingly enjoying a trade surplus of over $35 to $40 billion. And therefore, given that there is a discrepancy in terms of what US believes is the trade surplus and what is an economic trade surplus that is really happening, it has been a culmination of what has been brewing since 2018. And what has been brewing is that the trade environment has witnessed a movement away from globalization to protectionist behavior, which included tariff actions, both between India and US, as well as globally. So in recent years, you saw US imposing tariffs on steel and aluminum that were imported from India. It impacted the Indian exports quite significantly. India responded with a retaliatory tariff on American goods, which impacted their almonds, apples, certain machinery. So a lot of farm producers and their machinery. And we also, recollect the deal that happened before 2018, which was the Harley Davidson versus mangoes deal. That's what I call it, because, well, it was worded as motorcycles to be allowed to be imported into India against mangoes allowed to be imported into US. But it's essentially Harley Davidson which tried to set its base in India against mangoes being sold in US. We did end up selling a lot of mangoes. I'm not sure about the reverse that happened, which is Harley Davidson being sold in India. Now, to be fair, Harley Davidsons are pretty expensive machinery sold in a cost-sensitive economy. And that was also picked up as an issue by the US government, saying that India does not allow or has non-tariff trade barriers in imports, which certainly is not true. We are just a price-sensitive market. So the US has also scrutinized India's import tariffs on certain industrial products, such as agricultural products, citing concerns over market access. So obviously, these tariff moves have had a mixed effect on trade flows, business costs, investor sentiments, as the opening remarks mentioned, that we should ignore the short-term ups and downs that's happening and focus on long-term. And that's very true. But also we need to keep in mind that when businesses invest, they invest significant amounts of money, and therefore they require some kind of a regulatory stability to be able to forecast what their revenues will be, to be able to figure out what their profitability will be, and therefore make the investments accordingly, because there's a cost of capital. The moment you borrow money to put up capacities, your meter is on, and therefore you need to have some predictability in terms of how you will repay the money that you've got. Otherwise, you'll end up having non-performing assets in the hands of the banks. And then it'll lead to this vicious cycle of banks getting impacted, they not giving loans to more capacities being created, and therefore it becomes a vicious cycle. So as the tariffs go up and the cost of imported goods reduce the total volume of trade in affected areas, it leads to this vicious cycle getting triggered. So if you look at the instance of higher US tariffs on Indian steel shipments, it has led to a decline in exports. It has hurt Indian steel producers dependent on the steel market. And similarly, when India put the tariffs on some of the American agricultural products, it has impacted the US farmers. So it's a bit of a challenge when we get into this framework of trying to unilaterally increase tariffs, which is why we are trying to sit together between the two governments and sort out what the differences are. Tariffs also effectively increase the price of intermediate goods and capital equipment, which willy-nilly finally ends up increasing the cost to the consumer. Once the consumer faces these higher costs, they end up consuming less. Therefore, the market size reduces. Therefore, the total sales goes down, the economic activity goes down, the growth goes down. There's something that all of us know, there's economics 101, but I'm just playing it out in the context of what was playing out in between US and India, and therefore why this particular issue has been put under a very significant focus by both the governments so that it gets resolved. And both the companies of the US and India, they end up getting back to business and improving their sales. So the tariffs create this uncertainty, which is what we want to ensure that does not happen. Now, the good part is that beyond bilateral trade, we have been having very healthy relationship between India and US. However, when we look at tariffs on other countries also, it leads to breaking down of the total global trade environment. So even though India and US may be resolving their issues, but because every other supply chain starts getting broken down, still the cost of business for Indian companies and for the US companies become higher, and therefore the cost of doing business between India and US also starts showing up. So it can have a ripple effect, increasing cost and disrupting trade flows, not just bilaterally, but across the markets. And therefore for India, which has been trying to integrate deeper into the global value chain under initiatives such as Atmanirbhar Bharat, tariffs imposed by key partners does pose a challenge to its ambitions. Similarly, just as we have Atmanirbhar Bharat, the US has got what's called the Buy America, Build America Act, or the BABA Act, which is the US equivalent of Indian Atmanirbhar. So it's a US Atmanirbhar program. But again, it seems to impact Indian investments into America. The factories that have been set up based on what was there earlier has now become inoperable because of the changes that have been brought in the BABA Act. And that leads to investments going down the drain. It leads to non-performing assets getting created. One example that comes to my mind is optical fiber. There are many such examples. So we do need to have a predictability in the regulatory environment in both India and in US for both the companies to prosper. And that is what our governments are working towards. And despite these challenges, as I mentioned, the Indo-US trade relationship holds immense amount of promise, which both the governments understand. And therefore, we are moving towards a tariff reduction. We are moving towards a larger set of products being put into reciprocal 0-0 duty or a very low duty structure. In fact, to boost the bilateral trade, it appears that India is seeking duty concessions for labor-intensive sectors such as textiles, gems, jewelry, leather goods, garments, plastics, chemicals, shrimp, oilseeds, and so on and so forth. Similarly, US is looking for duty concessions in sectors which are important for US. Again, very predictable: industrial goods, automobiles, which includes EVs. And the good part is when they are asking for duty concessions, it's always reciprocal. So it's not just US industrial goods getting access to the Indian market, it's Indian industrial goods also getting access to the US market. Similarly, US EVs and Indian EV producers both will gain: wines, petrochemical products, dairy, and so on and so forth. Agriculture. Now, we all end up getting into this problem of agriculture because that's sensitive for every single government. For example, will India adopt the genetically modified crops? Now, those are issues that needs to be resolved because India domestically, as national treatment, does not allow the GM crop. So it has to figure out how to accommodate US or carve it out from the US agreements or have it unbound in these agreements that we get into. So therefore, as we move forward, tariffs have created hiccups in the India-US trade relationship, but that is solvable. It's getting solved. Insofar as the latest news that comes in, it seems that by June 25th, there will be an early harvest deal between India and US that should resolve much of these issues. And therefore, as the opening remarks were, I think we are moving towards a positive direction, and businesses should start focusing on business as usual, investing again in each other's economies, and pushing for more exports in the two economies. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for setting that perspective, on from both volume side and from both, opportunity side, how it is moving, forward. And as rightly said, that we expect probably a trade deal, going forward very soon. So we'll look forward to that part. Now, how do we, I mean, what are the tariff, areas where US has done some announcement and then made a pause? So we would invite two senior partners from our, partner Grant Thornton Bharat, Mr. Manoj Mishra and Mr. Biren Vyas, for giving us a context on what is the US reciprocal tariff policy and how the sectors and other areas are getting impacted. So over to you, Mr. Mishra and Mr. Vyas.
Thank you, Deepak. And indeed, we had a good, insightful presentation from Mr. Jayjeet. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So, before we deep dive into proposals and its impact on India and the different sectors, let's understand the how taxes are being implemented, how tariffs are being implemented around the world, how trade generally take place in the world, and why there is so much hue and cry when one nation implemented some reciprocal tariff on other nations. Why we are discussing this at all? Because we also have our budget where we impose tariff. We change, sometimes we change tariff rates. We sometimes we increase, sometimes we decrease, sometimes we exempt, and sometimes we withdraw exemption. Nobody makes any hue and cry about that. So why we are talking this? Why we are challenging why any particular country, a sovereign country, has done something like imposing tariff, and we are discussing here in India. So for that, we have to understand the general agreement between the countries and how to do business, how trade should take place. So for that, we have to go back, and when we like it was somewhere in 1947, after World War II. When economies of most of the countries who came after the war was in a very bad shape, and there was mistrust and global trades were not taking place, they coined mostly the French countries, which we call, who were winners of the World War II. They coined the idea of a global trade, and that is popularly named as General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, and we popularly know that as GATT. Can we have next slide, please? So, GATT was nothing, but it was an agreement. It was an attempt to make sure that there should be free and fair trade of goods between among the countries, and there should be minimum tariff and no non-tariff barriers. Okay, so for that. They drafted a concept paper, and surprisingly, US was one of the front runner, or one of the uh, proposers of this GATT. However, since US could not get it approved from their Congress. So here we need to understand that talking something globally, agreeing something on global platforms, and getting the same ratified by their parliament or their Congress are two different things. So here US, who proposed GATT, could not get the same approved by their Congress, and hence GATT remained like a guiding principle and could not take a legal frame. It could not implement it in a legal way or bound or a binding contract. However, it remained. It remained. It is like better sense prevailed, and despite not being legally binding, it prevailed as a guiding factor till the time WTO replaced GATT in 1995. Next slide, please. So when we signed WTO, the entire world, most of the countries signed, I think 105 at that point of time, when they signed WTO, it was based on two principles. One, MFN status, and no national treatment. It means that each country will provide same rate of taxes to all the countries. All the signatories of WTO will be treated in the same manner. Of course, there are some exceptions to that, and we know that bilateral trade agreements or some multilateral trade agreements or regional trade agreements, there are some exceptions. But in general, it was agreed that all the countries who are signatory to WTO will give most favored nation to their all the signatory. It means that they cannot have two rates. They cannot have two rates for different countries. Here, that is why we are saying we are crying foul, because here whatever tariff rate India has, it has for the entire world, or any country like China, or any, for that matter, any country. That rates are for the entire world and not especially for America. Okay, so because of MFN status, the rates are applicable for everybody, and they have not imposed any reciprocal tariff, whereas US has gone ahead and imposed reciprocal tariff, knowing fully well that because of certain arrangements, there are differences in rate. And what are those? So when they negotiated tariffs, and it was the longest ever discussion which took place before finalization of WTO, and that is known as Uruguay round of discussions. And during those discussions, they come to a conclusion that developed countries will give some kind of concession to developing countries to come to pace. So developed countries decided that they will reduce their tariff rates to to certain rates, which was generally ranging between 2.5 to 3.5, whereas the developing countries were given some time to come to that pace and reduce their tariff in a phased manner. And it was not without any reason. It has got a very valid reason, because when developed country got developed, when they were part doing their industrialization, at that point of time, they used the natural resources, they used manpower, and that too without any hindrance or without worrying about anything. Whereas now, when we are living, or when WTO got signed, at that point of time, people got very aware, and they were very conscious towards environment. There were various labor laws, and most of you would have heard about that many a times. Our tuna fish export got banned in US, and we had most of the Asian countries had to fight in WTO forum to get tuna fish ban lifted. Similarly, many a times exports from Bangladesh are being not allowed in many cases, saying that the child labor has been used to produce such malmal. So at that point of time, when developed countries got developed, these circumstances were not there. Now we have these circumstances. Now we had these circumstances. So that's why to give leeway and to ensure that they should get some time to their industry, to their domestic industries who could come to the terms and then open their economy, when then reduce their tariff. And you would have seen that we like reduce our tariff, which used to be somewhere in 60% in 1995. Now we have our normal rate of tariff is 7.5%. So we came a long way. We came a long way, and the focus is that reduction in rate of tariff or differentiation in rate of tariff is not something out of the blue. It was well discussed, well agreed, and developing countries were given time to adjust to that, and that's why there is a difference in the tariff rate. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, so we adopted WTO in the true spirits. We reduced our rates in the phase manners. Uh, in some cases where we were providing some incentives to our exporter, when it was objected to, we get into negotiate. We got into negotiating table. We withdrew that, and most of you would be aware about our SEIS, MEIS scheme, which we provide, which we used to give to our exporters of goods and services, and that was mainly to offset taxes, because at till that point of time we did not have any mechanism to compensate local taxes. So state taxes to the taxpayers, and state taxes to the service provider. So this was a mechanism by which we used to offset the tax burden that goods or services which are being exported has suffered. But when it was objected to by the developed countries, and we lost at first level, and though we filed appeal, but we went ahead, we discussed with them, and withdrew that appeal, as well as the incentives which we used to give to our exporters of goods and services. We are complying MFN principle in toto, and now we are moving towards the normal tariff rate. We have 7.5. The developed countries have 3.5, and definitely we are having discussion, and in a given period of time maybe we will be landing up at 5%, which is normally acceptable rate as of now. Further, of course, as Dr. Jagdeep rightly pointed out, agriculture is something very, very sensitive politically and economically. We do not have the luxury of having farmer who would have large land banks and doing agriculture at industrial scale. We have small farmers who would have very small farms and doing farming for their livelihood. So, of course, it is a very politically sensitive and economic sensitive subject. So it may take time, or you never know. It may never. Sometimes something may never get implemented. So that would definitely will remain a area where we would be very, very protective, and we should be protective. Like maybe these are my personal views for farmers. Here we stand. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So the most heartening and the important part is that though US came out with reciprocal tariff, but none of the countries who would have lower tariff, even than the tariff which US has, retaliated or followed the footprints of USA. So the countries like European Union, Canada, Australia, Japan, Singapore, their average tariff rate is lower than the tariff rate which US has. But none of the countries came and said that they are also going to impose reciprocal tariff on any other country like India or any other country in following the footprints of USA. That is something we should praise. We should accept that we are living in a world where better sense will prevail, And of course, the US may have its own grudges. They have their own reasons for doing that. But by and large, we can hope that world order is not going to be disrupted just because of one of the activities or one of the activities of any particular country. And even with that particular country, we believe that we would be getting into. We will sit on the table, we are discussing that, we are not retaliating, and we believe that we will come to some kind of conclusion which would be a win-win for both. With this, I hand it over to my colleague, Viren. Viren, over to you.
Thanks, Manoj. First of all, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks to Fiki for an opportunity, wonderful opportunity to connect with all, particularly to discuss on the most recent topic, which is which is under discussion by many industry players, is the reciprocal tariff. Just to highlight, probably I'll take it forward. I'll try to bridge the gap between the numbers which are already spoken and legislation and the scenario, particularly which is impacting the industry players. I'll try to highlight the points which will be very relevant, particularly between this. Point number one is, as you can see on the slide, while it was covered, I will prefer to, highlight once again that India is the seventh global exporter. In ranking, it is the 17th number. While world largest economy, we are fourth. And the difference between 4 and 17, you can understand. The reason is the home consumption, the higher home consumption. Nonetheless, does that mean that probably we don't have export potential? Yes, we have export potential. That goes without saying, not only to US, but to other countries as well. But the only thing is it needs to be, number one, evaluated properly in terms of quality that probably Indian players can, manufacture, maintain, and offer to the world. Second point is, which is very important now for the discussion which are going on, is the pricing, particularly pricing, which is how it is priced basis the effective supply chain infrastructure with the quality that you will be delivering, particularly for the all countries apart from the US. And if something with this is something which can be focused, then to bridge the gap between the 17th global exporter to move ahead in the ranking probably could be a possible. Nonetheless, if we move ahead and discuss about particularly pricing, it will come to the reciprocal. While 18th is actual total export to US, which is one of the largest country probably from India, where we are exporting to US, which is around 18% of the total export that we have. Now, if that is something which is largest, then we need to talk about the reciprocal tariff that goes without saying. And what is reciprocal tariff? Post 1930, particularly US agenda, they have shifted to safeguard the American industry. That's where it has been started. It's not a recent one, but next slide, please. Yeah, seventh. Initially post 1930, the agenda shifted to safeguard the American industry and negotiating the reciprocal trade. What is the reciprocal trade? Now, US particularly, focus on the import tax to mirror the tariff rates or trade barriers that foreign country impose on the goods exported. And that's what, but in Reciprocal Tariff Act 1934, which was introduced by government at that point of time to negotiate the bilateral tariff reduction agreements, and it's not recent one, to be very frank, and it's since those days. Of course, it's on and off between, that goes without saying, and for longer period, longer decade, that's for sure. This particularly from it's particularly from an angle to protect the American industries, jobs, reduce the trade deficit, and these were the key drivers, particularly for that. America first trade policy, new government is focusing, and that's where it is moving towards. Some of the major steps, action steps which are taken, particularly keeping this in mind, that America first trade policy should be there. The new tariff, which is targeting the various countries and giants, nonetheless, China, EU, and major economies. New tariff which has been introduced. Tariff includes various products which are already spoken, but some of them are impacting India, like steel, aluminium, solar panel. Some of them are excluded also, semiconductor, pharma, and those are already discussed. So I prefer to not to highlight the list. But it's a proper move to move from multilateralism to the bilateral pressure tactics in international trade, which helps, particularly which support the US economy very well. Overall, next slide, please. Request. Overall, if we focus, total trade, particularly US exports, while it has already been spoken, but I'll prefer to highlight once again that US total export is, particularly 41.8 billion, while, India export to US, which is 87.4 billion. And here is the gap. Someone has already raised the question, asked that, probably why we are worrying, because we, if you look at it, the India is one who is already benefiting out of it, because trade deficit is more for the US and less for the India. And precisely, it's more worry for India if it is probably if it is reduced. And that's where it's worrying not only to India but China as well. Overall, top export values, if you look at it, engineering goods, which is 18 billion, electronic goods, precious stones, drug, formulation, petro, ready-made garments, all there, there is a huge list, but the few exclusions are again relevant. And US has particularly uh, excluded or rather intentionally kept those away from particularly reciprocal tariff or pharmaceutical product. Let me highlight. And nonetheless, majority pharma, of course, we have industry players here also to discuss, which they will cover later. But there are few pharma entities which already have a presence in India, but still the pharmaceutical products are excluded, particularly at this stage. Semiconductor devices, wood articles, and multiple other products which are already excluded consciously. Next slide, please. So overall, between from period somewhere around January 25 to March 25, probably the administration imposed a tariff particularly on the identified countries. And those identified countries are known total, multiple countries of 56 countries, around 56 countries, and probably 10% baseline for 57 countries. And that's what, post new government, these are the major steps which are already introduced. There were few announcements, particularly highlighting the various rates, particularly for the various countries and the various products, which certainly will be too long to highlight at this stage. But these are visible and probably isn't easily identifiable, basis which one can look frequently and regularly as and when they've completed the evaluation. 4th April, 5th April, 9th April, gradually they've step by step they've announced those, particularly targeting the respective countries and respective products, which they thought that there were few exemptions which are already there, which I've highlighted. But currently, 90 days pause, which is announced particularly from May, 14th May 2000, if I remember correctly, 14th May 2025. Reduced tariff for China, again, they've reduced week. It was as high as 145% at one point of time, but now it is reduced to 30%. And China has reduced the rate for US to 10%, and which is a recent, development. I'm sure you must be aware, but these are the points which I thought I should be highlighting to all of you, particularly for the alignment. For the question that will be covered later on in the post this, my discussion. 50% tariff on EU, particularly from 1st June, which is under negotiation, and they've cancelled the imposition of 50% tariff on EU, and the deadline to conclude the discussion is set somewhere around 9th July. That's status so far. Next slide, please. With this, I'll just crisp and highlight with crisp limited points. I'll prefer to highlight impact on the consumers in the US, which will be very relevant, not from the India but US. And if they are impacted, particularly the export from India or any other countries, will certainly will have impact that goes without saying. Again, keeping those in mind, there are a few points which I would like to highlight, that there's a very lower awareness, particularly of the tariff, but with regard to the reciprocal tariff. What I meant is only one third consumer in the US particularly understand the tariff. What is reciprocal tariff? Not that balance don't understand. They might not have applied. Might probably is my assumption. That goes without saying. No other intention. But only 20% consumer believe that the tariff will protect domestic job and industries, and the balance 80% consumers, they have felt noticeable inflation in past some time. Maybe because of one of the reason is reciprocal tariff. But yes, they are the one from the lot who strongly believe or probably who will follow made in US policy. And the way they've highlighted that probably if something which is printed as a made in US, they will pick that up. They'll blindly highlight. Just to summarize, I'll quickly summarize the reciprocal tariff, particularly to resolve the US trade deficit. Trade deficit reason for number weakened US manufacturing sector, particularly where they need to strengthen, reduce the incentive. It will reduce the incentive, particularly for the domestic manufacturer, where they have. It will disrupt the essential supply chain as well, because probably maybe some of the countries they may look for option, and that's something. Third impact. Fourth is the increased reliance on the defense industrial base on foreign countries, and that could be another. So these are four, around 3 to 4 points which probably will be certainly there. US imposes lower tariff for key products like passenger vehicles, and those are already again visible. But overall, how the specific sector which majorly export to US, and which will need evaluation, particularly from the impact of tariff perspective. I'll prefer to involve my other colleague, Sachin Shinde, and Rahul Verma and others, particularly to discuss those points and highlight with all other who are attendees. Sachin Shinde, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you, Biren, for summarizing. And first of all, a warm welcome to all of you. What we're going to do now is going to hold a panel discussion with some of the esteemed guests that we have. But before we move into the panel discussion, let me kind of give you a perspective of what Principal ADG Mr. Sumit Kumar mentioned, that the government is listening and the government wants to know what are the concerns, what are the areas that it could help, which is only reflective of his entire team led by himself are present continuously on this in this session, in this webinar. Secondly, very important thing to highlight by Dr. Jajit Bhattacharya was that when you're actually doing some computations around the trade deficit, has it really factored some of the elements which have not been considered at all? One thing which really I could relate to was the education services, if I may say so, how much we import. And that's something which is substantial. These numbers do not get reflected anywhere in the computation. So it can't be just a plain vanilla comparison between what's the rate of tax when I import the particular good, or what is the rate of tax when US imports the particular good. And I think that's something which is very relevant to know, that when we are imposing any tariffs, it needs to be looked at from a 360-degree perspective. And again, coming to my fellow partners, Manoj and Biren, very rightly highlighted what is the entire context of the tariff, the reciprocal tariff. Parallelly, also to understand and appreciate some of the areas where the countries, though US has put in a tariff, but there are other countries whom we trade with, and none of these countries have really retaliated in that manner or acted or reacted in that manner. So therefore, it's something which is noteworthy that the World Trade Organization is functional, it is operating, and it is set out certain guidelines and policies and rules which most of the countries are following. And if there are any concerns around trade deficits, people are sitting across the table and responding to them in a meaningful manner. Parallelly, one thing which really highlighted again was, though there are disruptions in supply chain at the US level, does it open opportunities for us in India to explore those disruptions and maximize and take advantages, if any? So with that, as a summary, let me call upon our panelist for this session. To begin with, I welcome Mr. Rajan Raje. Mr. Rajan Raje is the founder and CEO of Nichem Solutions. Nichem Solutions is in the business of specialty chemical sector. He's been committed to innovation, sustainability, and has been constantly on a customer-centric focused. Mr. Raje was honored with Business Leader of the Year Award at Fortune Global Excellence Awards in Dubai for sustainable innovation and industry leadership. Welcome, Rajan. Glad to have you on the panel.
Thank you, Sachin.
Along with Mr. Rajan Raje, I have Mr. Rahul Verma. Mr. Rahul Verma is the VP Corporate Finance at Cipla Limited, a veteran professional with almost 2 decades of experience. He spent almost a decade of that in Cipla. He brings in deep expertise in corporate finance planning and operations. With his diverse background in software engineering and finance at organizations such as eConnect, NIIT, Mercer India, and Unichem, it gives him a unique and a cross-functional perspective to this entire issue or the entire situation that we are huddled with. Welcome, Rahul. Glad to have you on the panel. Along with him, we also have Mr. Sridhar Kamath. Mr. Sridhar Kamath is a partner with Grant Thornton Bharat, a fellow partner with me. Sridhar is a seasoned professional with almost 2 decades of experience in business transformation, operational excellence, and strategic consulting. He's led large-scale transformation programs across diverse sectors, including manufacturing, energy, automotive, consumer, and heavy industries. All of them at the hem of their businesses, of their organizations, will help us to kind of dive deep in understanding the implications or understanding how do we look at and how do we absorb these changes which are happening so dynamically. With that, let me start off with. I'm not going to be doing a rapid fire round as such, but let me get Mr. Raji on first. Mr. Rajan, help me understand. With such kind of export dynamics, with such kind of volatility, how do you feel that the MSMEs overall has improved or suffered? What has been your sense of how has the MSME sentiments been in the circles that you have been speaking?
See, frankly speaking, why America, even entire geopolitical situation everywhere is so challenging that there are disruptions. And those disruptions probably are going to be the part of business, part of life. And one has to find productive ways to come out of it and progress. For MSME, the challenges are because of their size, because of their might, and because of their capabilities. So those challenges are more. The larger organizations like Cipla, probably they will weather the storm in a much better way. But for MSME, especially the exports, if you have established a business with your client, with a specific country, if that gets disrupted, then finding the alternative becomes slightly difficult in an immediate future. But anyway, as I said, if this is going to be a part and parcel of your business, then you have to be agile, you have to be innovative, you have to be more proactive in finding the alternatives. The MSME has to be technologically savvy. They have to have probably the joint ventures on technology more than anything else, because what we offer to the world is comparatively cheaper labor. The productivity probably is still a question mark, but yes, we are learning. I mean, I see more and more MSMEs. They are becoming more agile, more techno savvy. They adopt AI, they adopt automation. So if the MSME learns out of this and they treats that, yes, these disruptions over a period of time are going.
Hello, Rajan, are you able to hear me?
So that's what my immediate take is.
So would you say that earlier in the historic days, maybe geopolitics per se did not impact as much as it would be today, and this is something which is going to be the new normal, and it's okay to kind of work with the new normal and work around it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, who expected Ukraine war to continue for so long? Who expected Israel and Palestinian war to continue for so long? Who expected that America all of a sudden will start imposing the retaliatory tariffs? So it was completely unexpected. And honestly speaking, we were not prepared for it. I mean, I never expected personally that it is going to impact my business so much because we have export in 12 countries and the challenges are more or less everywhere. So the only lesson what I have learned is yes, we have to be cost effective, we have to be more productive, we have to be innovative because that's what we do in our business. That innovation, I mean, for our kind of business, we have an innovation center of 10,000 square feet. And we not only innovate for ourselves, but we also innovate for the others. Because I know the MSME to have an innovation center or a development center on their own has multiple challenges. One is financial, the other one is the skill set. So so that is what we try to do our bit, and I think we are not seeing too much of a disruption yet because of the
I think
specialty nature.
very well rounded off in that sense that it's not only about the labor arbitrage that we have, but also the element of innovation. And I can then relate to you, why did you get an award for innovation in that sense? So, congratulations.
Thank you.
Let me come back to Guru Rahul at this moment. Rahul, we understand there's a lot of negative sentiments around this tariff, that there is an escalation in that sense. But I always believe that there are, two sides to a coin. One side where we've looked at the negative sentiments around the tariff, the increase, the countermeasures being taken. But the other side of the coin, do you think that there are any opportunities or underlying opportunities which are there? And how do you think one can take advantage of those opportunities, if any? Any thoughts on those?
Yeah, thanks, Sachin, for that opportunity. Thanks for that question, and thank Vicky for this opportunity. Sachin, when we actually first kind of heard this, announcement on tariff, and we went on the board to kind of calculate how this is going to impact us, how it's going to impact the competition, how it's going to impact, the competition across the world. So the things are very clear that, tariff is not something that is going to be, absorbed by the manufacturer. It is definitely going to be, shared by the entire supply chain. And ultimately, the burden is going to be on the customer. Having said that, some of those announcements which came like, of the shoot, which came like in a big bang shot, they were just, we all understand more of opportunity to just get into, a discussion on tariff and, align by way of agreement by various countries with US. But what I thought in my personal wisdom, even those tariffs when they were introduced, there was some competitive advantage with the Indian companies by themselves has. There were issues like there always going to be higher tariff compared to India when it was announced originally, vis-a-vis China, vis-a-vis Mexico and Canada. So even if we just compare these three nations, which if they are producing certain goods, or even if the raw material of those goods are being imported from those country in US, manufacturing with those imports in US is going to be costlier than exporting from India, including tariff. So that's the basic math that we did, and we find out our recommendation was India is going to be getting its way out on this in most of the products, because Indian advantage in terms of the raw material, as well as in terms of production ability, as well as the scale, is going to have a impact, and probably we will be able to get a larger share if the tariff remain in the same form as they were announced earlier, wherein those Chinas and Mexicos and Canadas, they are going to have a disproportionately larger impact of tariff, and India is going to have a lower, or if bilaterally, if we say if we are charging 7.5-10% tariff, even that kind of tariff remains, then we are going to be on an advantageous position. I hope so. If we do maths, calculate it right, do the zero-based costing for what is going to be the costing if the same product is manufactured in US vis-a-vis India. I believe the people would be doing on the other side a similar calculation, how to make it cost effective in US. But it's going to be tough maths for other part of the world vis-a-vis the natural advantage of India as such. So that is one. Besides that, for any corporate who's actually actively doing business in US, the compliance comes first. They also has to make sure that whatever export which are being done in US They are compliant with the law of the land. Whatever tariff that are already in place between, say, Mexico, Canada, and China, they are being complied with, and all the imports. If those imports are of that origin and subject to the duty or from that country, then the duty has to be paid. And so, amazingly, the rule of origin for pharma products in US is based on the APIs or the chemical that is used as a main ingredient. If the main ingredient which is used in a pharmaceutical product is purely a Chinese product or a Mexican product or a Canadian product, even if you are, assembling or manufacturing the pharmaceutical good in India, it will be subject to the duty as per the rule of origin. The rule of origin will be followed as there in the APIs, unless you are doing some more processing to the API or transferring the API into another chemical. Then only the rule of origin. Otherwise, we are just making medicine with a single one API from China or Mexico or Canada. It will be considered that origin and it will be subject to tariff. So we have to constantly kind of see what are the rule of origin, how even if we are manufacturing goods in India, whether based on the value addition criteria, whether on whatever rule of origin that follow that product, whether even if we are exporting from India, whether they still qualifies as non-Indian product when it lands in US, and we have to do necessary compliance so that we avoid penalty and other consequences on compliances. Thanks, Sachin.
I think very well, laid out in that sense. Coming from the accounting background, nothing works unless and until you do the math right. And I think when we do the math right, it's important to explore what are the higher tariffs which are reaching out to the other countries and explore whether there are opportunities lying in those. And I think that's something which is very important to kind of look at. Let's say if there's a product which is getting higher taxed, or there's a higher tariff from something which is being imported out of China or Canada or Mexico, I need to have my grounds laid in terms whether I'm able to do that from India. And I think those are some of these opportunities very well highlighted to look at the math, look at outside in. It's not about putting your head down and saying, oh, I've been taxed in that sense, but kind of raise your head high and look out and see what are the opportunities lying. And I think that's one thing which is a good takeaway. I'll come to Sridhar now, where Rajan mentioned about innovation. Rahul mentioned about how do I look outside and explore in that sense and do my math right. Sridhar, you're coming from a consulting background in that sense, having looked at operations, supply chain, strategy. How do you think that you would want to kind of gather this and explore what kind of value-added manufacturing in the MSME space one can look at? What are the disruptions which could engage us into innovating more? Are these disruptions something which is enabling us to think strategically, or are these some things which are kind of being these disruptions are pressurizing and putting us down? How do you look at these global value chains in that sense to capitalize and to take certain strategic calls, especially from an MSME sector?
No, great question, Sachin, and thanks so much. If I look at how organizations can respond to something like this, and I go with what Rajan said. Today we are just, maybe the context is the how this tariff is being played out between US and India, but every time there is going to be some disruption or the other, right? And therefore, as MSMEs or as manufacturing organizations, we need to be prepared every time for some disruption or the other that will happen. And I think that we could look at it from three lenses, right? So one is the strategic lens, and you spoke about value addition, and that's one of the strategic lenses to look at. So, for example, somebody who has been supplying raw materials to the US, can we move up the value chain to get into semi-finished or finished goods, right? And that sort of helps us because tariffs may be lower there compared to raw materials. So that's one strategic lens to look at. The other thing, in terms of again, moving up the value chain, if you will, is to build customized products for specific customer segments in the geography. So in US, looking at targeting certain customer segments and looking at specific products which then help you to get better value rather than commodity products, right? The third thing in terms of value addition could be bundling of services, right? So therefore, after sales service as a means of enhancing the value provided to consumer, and therefore that becoming that giving you a competitive edge. Or IP based products, so which means that having some patents or design or and so on and so forth behind it, which then helps you to command a better price in any market that you go to. So these are some of the strategic levers, right? So we could look at it from a structural point of view, and you mentioned global value chains, right? And therefore, some of the things that organizations could look at is in terms of, looking at geographies which have a lower tariff, structure, and then looking at probably partly manufacturing, in those countries before sending into the US, and that sort of helps you to get a better tariff, right? Of course, the rules of origin and so on and so forth will continue to matter, but you can still look at designing your supply chain in that manner and becoming part of other global value chains where you can play a role, which does not hamper you from exports, right? In terms of, again, when you talk about the origin rules and so on and so forth, there is an opportunity from a local sourcing perspective, because organizations will try and look at, can we source within India rather than source from China or any other country which has a much higher tariff. And therefore, it gives a lot of opportunity for manufacturers to look at innovation, to look at doing things in India and sourcing in India. There could be other things like regional hubs or joint ventures, partnering with US-based distributors and so on and so forth, which could be other structural levers to look at. And finally, if you look at operational ones, I think that, and Rajan again mentioned it, improving productivity and quality of our products so that we are more competitive, right? And therefore, being up the curve in terms of both productivity and quality will be very helpful. And I think that in looking at this and efficiency, a lot of support can be provided by adopting digital technologies and technology in general. So therefore, looking at how we can enhance our productivity and quality by doing this. So these were some of the thoughts, Sachin, that we could look at.
I think absolutely in the entire theme that I kind of could resonate with you is there is an opportunity in this adversity, and one needs to really look at that opportunity and find out and pick it up and kind of think about it in a very, very objective manner. And I think I could just summarize that it was just striking to me that there is an opportunity in every adversity that we have. So glad to have your thoughts, Sridhar. I'll come to Rajan again. Rajan, you mentioned that, for example, in your business, you've if I may say, you export to almost 12 odd countries. How much do you think de-risking is relevant in the current context? Over dependencies, should be avoided. How much do you think there is an opportunity for our products or in any market segment in that sense to explore markets other than US also? Is that something which enables you to de-risk and also look at it more strategically in expanding our markets the way Sridhar mentioned?
Yeah, I think the de-risking is absolutely necessary. I mean, we have learned it hard ways. Once upon a time, we had one client in Mexico who was 50% of our business. And there was a disruption, not because of anything else. He himself was disrupted. So as a result of that, we got disrupted. And that taught us one lesson, that never be dependent on one customer. So we have strategically tried to follow that. Ideally, I mean, no customer or no product should be more than 15% of your total turnover, ideally. But there is always a difference between ideal and realistic situation. Today, we have dependence on one customer, fortunately Indian, but about 25-30%. But strategically and systematically, we are trying to ensure that we are not over dependent on one client, one country, or one technology for more than 15-20%. And that probably is a need, because you never know where the risk will come from. You never know where the disruption will come from. So one has to be always be ready, looking out for newer markets, newer applications, newer products, and that's what we keep doing. Our innovation center is nothing but that. We are always ready for the future or for any challenge in the near future.
No, excellent thoughts. I would want to kind of take a question eventually on, but maybe I'll keep it at the last stage. In terms of how much you feel de-risking is important on a scale of 1 to 10. But I'll come to that eventually with all
Sure.
the
Sure.
panelists. I'll come to Rahul. Rahul, from a government standpoint or from a policy intervention standpoint, could you share some thoughts in terms of what are the areas that you believe that such kind of a disruption to turn it into a strategic advantage for India and especially for our MSME sector? What are the things that you feel that the government could kind of really help us in? Any policy related matters that you feel could enable us to move into that strategic mode?
Yeah, thanks for asking this question. And the schemes of the government which are very close to our heart, which has been supported, the exports pretty largely in all segments, has been the MEIS and SEIS schemes, where those schemes are actually directly incentivizing exports. So having said that, something, a scheme which is actually, giving some impetus on the turnover, the incremental turnover, in terms of incentivizing the industry rather than subsidizing the patient on the other side, because the government is not supposed to kind of subsidize the treatment of patient on the other side. It is the economics which has to take place in any case. But having said that, considering that this kind of turmoil which is happening in terms of the major supply chain rejig which is going to happen in July, once the final shape of tariff is going to come out, there's going to be some disruption wherein people has to move their supply chain, people has to move from one way of imports or one way of export to some other, and kind of find out way in time. Having said that, at the end of the day, the customer or the patient, they are not going to be left in the lurch without any support for their daily needs. They are going to be provided, and ultimately the demand is not going to vanish overnight. Demand is going to remain there. It's only like for a few months they may be met out of the inventories, but having said that, the demand is going to come back. But to support for those couple of months or for those couple of quarters, if some kind of a scheme could be built up wherein some support could be given to MSMEs, that will be very grateful. We have got tens of schemes which I was discussing with my exim team, which was there in the past, which was around export and imports and capex, on focus market and focus products. Something like that could be worked out to tide over this tight moment for the Indian industry as such.
No, absolutely. I think very well said. Rather, let me, as we read today's newspapers, the government has released almost 18,000 crore plus of ROTEP funds. And I think that's something which is a very welcome move in that sense to kind of enable people, especially in the MSME sector. Working capital becomes a substantial challenge and it becomes a hurdle in that sense. How does the government enable them by granting such kind of ROTEP benefits, parallelly helping them to release their refunds in a streamlined manner, maybe more focused towards MSMEs in terms of timelines, all these steps, and I think will go a long way for them to kind of survive in these turbulent times. And I think this goes a long way to support. Let me come back to Sridhar. Sridhar, from a global supply chain perspective, what do you think are the key levers that you may want to look at, and how do you leverage on this global supply chain shift that may happen eventually? What are the things that you could kind of look at, for example, one of the conversations that I was having was, if you look at the US, the ports in the US, the infrastructure which is there. I was speaking to one of the captains of a ship, and he was mentioning that from the sea, a ship actually goes almost 8 hours into the Mississippi River, and you have ports right into the heart of the US heartland. So to that extent, from a logistic supply chain, I just wanted to get a sense of how do I capitalize on the change of this disruption into the supply chain.
Yeah, so I think that if we look into the past also, Sachin, right? Every time there is a disruption, global supply chains do get redesigned or rejigged. And if you look at, but they are not something that happens overnight. It does not happen. It takes a number of years, if you will, right? Some of it is immediate response to try and at least meet whatever demand and that may be there. But the final redesign to come down to a stabilized manner and at a cost efficient supply chain takes a lot of time. And I think that being prepared in terms of trying to understand, and you mentioned looking at how do these disruptions affect our supply chain and logistics costs, and therefore what could be the doing the math to say where is it that I can, or what mode or what countries or what kind of supply chain should I redesign now to be able to still maintain the final price, right? A landed cost to my customer. I think that will play a key role, and that I think will be a lot of opportunities, because every time that we have seen any of these disruptions happen, we have also seen organizations rise up to the challenge and look at optimizing their costs across, right, across the supply chain to be able to still meet the needs of the customer and in a cost efficient manner. And I think that as long as we are open to try and understand in advance if there are going to be risks to the supply chain, if you're going to see disruptions in terms of raw material supply or in terms of the ability to supply on time, and we are able to plan ahead, I think that there will be an opportunity for every manufacturer to not only meet but enhance their presence on the global stage. And now with other agreements being signed and other countries being similarly affected, as long as we keep our eyes open to see what new opportunities are coming up. So for example, with the UK now there is an agreement. How can we leverage that agreement, for example, to be able to supply more to that economy? And given that we are going to supply to the UK, can we now look back and say, okay, can we have EU as a new market that we would want to go into, right? That becomes an opportunity for us. And now looking at the supply chain backwards to try and say, how do I make my logistics and the supply chain network efficient enough to be able to supply to these markets will become the need of the hour.
No, I think excellent thoughts in that sense. I'm sensitive of the time that we have, and there are enough. I think we can go on for a conversation for the next 1 hour plus,
Absolutely.
and I think it'll still be engaging. But I would want to just close on your sense on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 being a dampener, this entire phase being a dampener, and 10 being an opportunity. Where do all 3 of our panelists look at this? Where do you rate this situation, if I may say so, whether it's a dampener or is it an opportunity? I'll start with Rajan.
10.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
Yeah, well, that's what the spirit is, and spirit should be.
This is
Look
purely
at
an
the
entrepreneur
opportunity in
spirit.
every adversity.
Great, great. Rahul, what about you?
So I will be somewhere around 7 or 8. Because thing is, in business, generally we like, the certainty around policies, and we try to accelerate with that certainty with the clear skies. But having said that, these are some dark clouds for the moment, and we would like to sail through, even faster and even, healthier in this.
You would want to go to 10 only when you do the math.
Yes. And maybe perhaps you may reach to 12 in that case.
Okay, perfect. What about Sridhar? Where do you see on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you see the situation?
I see it as a 10, Sachin, because again, as consultant,
Yeah,
we thrive in
majority. Look at
uncertainty.
that.
And I think that every uncertainty brings with us a lot of opportunity. We just have to apply our mind to it.
Perfect. I think with that, I would still say everyone is on the positive note that there is an opportunity here. Need to have those hawk eyes to look at it. I'll just close. Thank you, for the wonderful thoughts that you've kind of shared with us. I'll just close with a small thing which really resonates with me. I'm a fan of Steven Seagal, the Hollywood actor. If you notice, he's a martial art specialist in that sense. But in terms of his height, in terms of weight, he's not something which is he's flexible. But every force, every punch that he gets, he is able to divert that force in a manner, that punch in a manner, and makes it in favor of that force. And I think that's something which I could really resonate, that yes, there is a substantial force, but can we be the Steven Seagals and divert this into an opportunity is what we need to look at. With that, I'll close this wonderful panel that we've had. We're going to have a quick Q&A session for the panelists. If you have any questions, please feel free to share on the chat, and we'll be happy to take. Not many though, but a few of them, if possible, at least. I'm sensitive of the time, but Deepak, do we have some time for questions?
Sachin, we can take maybe a couple of them which are already there on the Q&A box, and if there are any, maybe another 5-7 minutes.
Sure. Thanks, Deepak.
Thanks.
And I just want to, because there's one gentleman, Mr. Atul Kulkarni, has asked about if FICCI is planning to do some kind of interaction. So I just would like to sort of inform him that we are already doing a discussion. In fact, the USTR delegation yesterday visited FICCI in Delhi, and we had interaction with the industry leader. So we are continuously looking at talking to all the stakeholders with whom we have partnership, whether at chamber level or at an institutional level or a government level, to pass on our industry suggestion and messages, so that when this trade deal, which we are looking at, a mini and major trade deal happens, the suggestions of industry is also taken care of. So that would be an answer which Mr. Kulkarni had asked on FICCI's initiatives. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Deepak. So you've responded to that. I will just take one question which has come in. It pertains to the electronic sector. The question asked is India emerging as a prominent electronic sector player, keeping in mind tariff implications by US on India with 26%. What will be the impact of Indian imports and exports to the US, especially vis-a-vis the electronic sector? Rajan, Rahul, Siddharth, anyone of you would want to take a dig at it?
Yeah, Sridhar, you want to say? You are on mute.
You're on mute if you're speaking.
Sorry. Yeah. So if I look at it, we should look at it as two perspectives, right? One is in terms of, and here maybe the comparison with what's happening. If you look at electronic sector, China is the major exporter. But if we look at the tariff imposed on China, I mean, even in terms of the proposed and then brought down to, as of now, 30%, it will still be worse off than in India, as long as India is able to ensure that it is able to have that level of price competitiveness, right? And that is something that we can focus on. It opens up an opportunity for us. If we look at what China exported to the US last year, it would be somewhere in the range of about $120 billion. And that I think provides an opportunity for us to play in that space as well. So I think irrespective of the tariffs, given the kind of focus and the policies of the government with respect to the electronic sector, given the kind of thrust that is there to put India on the global map with respect to electronics, and then this potential opportunity that we have if these tariffs that are imposed on other countries continue to work the way they are currently proposed, then there is a significant opportunity for us.
Correct.
Thanks, Rajan. You had to say anything on this?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with him. See, ultimately, honestly speaking, I don't think the kind of tariffs the Trump government is talking about will be sustainable or will be implemented, because ultimately his own country pays for it. We don't. I mean, we'll only try to minimize the impact, but ultimately their consumers will pay. And knowing American consumers, they will not like it. So I'm sure the government will go steady on it. Their purpose is same. They want to reduce the overall trade imbalance. And I completely agree with that. But ultimately, how practical is it that the America as a country is going to be a manufacturing hub? They have lost on that bus 50 years ago. So today it is going to be impossible, looking at their labor cost, looking at their infrastructural cost. So it is not going to be easy. Technology wise, they are superior. They better be in the technology segment or defense segment, aircraft segments, and all those things are perfect. World will be very willing and happy to do that. The low cost products where China is today a major supplier, there we have an opportunity. If we follow the Chinese model, if we follow their productivity and the government support. So that is where the real opportunity is. And we should definitely look at it. Specialty products, we definitely have opportunity there. So overall, I think the situation is not as bleak as people believe it would be. It is going to be an even keel for everyone.
Rather, I was exactly resonating to what you mentioned, that China in the electronics sector, it is only an opportunity for us from an India standpoint. And if we are able to get onto the innovation side of it with what China has done historically to get ahead in the electronic manufacturing sector curve, I think India has an amazing potential to that extent. It will need support from the government. It will need to have policies. It will need to have parks which will enable electronics, may not be high-end, but at least the low-end electronic manufacturing capabilities to be built. And whatever it takes, and I think it will be an amazing journey if we really capitalize on that.
Yeah, anyway, see, who gave technology to China, America, and the developed countries? They will be willing to give us, because if we provide them with the productivity and the low cost productivity, why every world will come to us. So we should be ready for that opportunity.
I just had one point, Sachin, here. Sorry to interject, but just a thought. While we and I think it's been a very interesting conversation. I think what we've been talking about, how with every challenge there is always an opportunity that is lurking somewhere behind, and it's for us to spot it and leverage and take advantage of it. I would also say that given the fact that, today you have people from the revenue who are actually listening and who've taken the effort and invested their time and money in kind of, conducting this entire or helping Fiki also to conduct this webinar. I think one of the important aspects, and this is purely for industry, are there any existing procedural aspects which can be simplified? Okay, because that also leads to cost savings. So, it should be a two-pronged approach. One is, of course, look out for opportunities wherein we have to take, probably the first mover advantage if wherever it is available. Second, look at our own existing processes and procedures. Can we simplify that? And is that something that, industry would like to put forth before the government? Saying that, these are some of the steps, if we were to go down that path, probably it just eases the compliance burden. It probably just adds to, a little bit more savings, which in turn results in your cost efficiency and your productivity overall. So,
yeah, Rajesh, I think you came out with a very, very valid point. Yes, I mean, if you look at China, I have been traveling to China and looking at the way they produce the things. See, the government support is immense. I'm not saying it is sustainable for a country like us, but then some support from the government, then the overall labor law simplification, overall export incentive revitalization, and few other things like this, anyway, they are needed, irrespective of the current situation. They are anyway needed if we have to be a 12 or $13 trillion economy. Without manufacturing, no economy can really progress, and no economy can really sustain the overall position and the growth. So that anyway is required. So some of the things as a manufacturer which came to me are these. Then government has to really give a lot of support for innovation, then lot of support on technology, lot of support on JVs, if they can come from the developed countries, where the developed countries need the cheaper manufacturing basis. We have probably delayed ourselves in all this, but time is still not gone. I mean, we are
It's never
still
too late.
there. Absolutely, we are
It's
still
never too
there,
late.
Totally, then never.
and we should begin at the earliest. I
Yeah.
know the government is making a lot of efforts on various platforms. I keep listening to various opportunities and various initiatives the government have. The unfortunate part is those initiatives do not reach at the level where they are required. Even the awareness is not there. So if the government can do that, these things, I think we'll be absolutely third developed economy soon.
Okay,
I think
great.
very valid, Rajashri, very valid points,
Yeah, absolutely.
an amazing conversation in that sense. I know there are a lot of questions. As I said, this conversation can go for the next 2 hours also, and it'll be still interesting and amazing. So
Maybe the
uh,
rest of the Q&A, I think
we can,
probably a response can be sent out, Deepak, if that's okay, because the questions are quite, there are a few questions which remain to be answered, and maybe we can respond to them later, if that's okay, post the webinar.
Yeah, sure, sure. I think
Yeah,
that
I
would
think
do.
I
that will
think
be
That
good.
would do.
we'll be
Yeah,
absolutely glad to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. No,
with
so
that,
thank you.
I close the Q&A session as well. Over to you, Deepak.
Yeah, thank you very much. And that was very, very, informative session, as well as, great ideas coming from all the panelists, to us. I would now like to invite Dr. Praveen Kumar, joined DGFT, Mumbai and Nagpur, for the closing remark. And if Sir Sumit Kumar ji also had some, observation, would like to, hear from him also as a closing remark. So over to both of you, sir.
Thank you. So it was with some interest that I managed to take down notes when all of us were, kind of deliberating on the issues, and a few takeaways which I could immediately no, shaft out from the discussion is that we should think this so-called tariff tantrum from the US perspective also, that it's an overarching theme in all these, the ups and downs in tariff is to somehow bring all these countries to a negotiating table.
Yeah.
So 57 nations, and I'm taking this data from one of the Grant Thornton PPTs. US has 57 nations which it has identified that it has trade surplus with. And out of these major 5-6 nations, already India, Vietnam, you and some other small nations are already in talks with the US for negotiating a trade deal, and that can probably happen very quickly by the time July ends, or for India, maybe June. June end, we would have something, a sort of a mini deal which might come up given the recent movements which you have seen in the newspapers. So with that in focus, and now that we are at 28th May, for the coming business cycle, for the small industries and even the medium industries which are listening to this, for the coming business cycle, the time is now to, be prepared for any concessions which you might get in the US market, and also prepare your supply chain accordingly. So you should not be sitting back saying that tariffs to zyada badi gaye hain, now we cannot, we should not take any action. Anyhow, this period, this May-June period, is the time for small businesses to stock up their inventory and prepare for the larger season of buying which comes in October and November. So particularly the MSMEs which are in the textile sector, the MSMEs which are in the plastic and kitchenware sector, the MSMEs which are in the paint sector and chemical sector. This is the cycle. This is the time of the year wherein you actually stock up your inventory, talk with your buyers, and look for potential buys in the next 2-3 months. So with that context, let me set my tone. So the overarching theme is that we have now some 30-40 days before the waters will be much more clear. Currently they are muddy. We would have some tariff certainty after 30 days. And in that period, I would also request the industry to use the forums which FICCI or other industrial associations like export promotion councils they provide to give any inputs regarding their export product. So now when the Department of Commerce is negotiating with countries like UK and America, we are often at the government level for very niche products. We are often not abreast with what is happening at the ground. So any such exporter who feels that in the last 90 days his export orders have come down and the buyer there in US has declined to give any reason why they have not put the repeat orders. Any such issue, please bring forth to us. Please write to DOC so that they can know that okay, this product which is in this HSN code is facing such and such issue. So that when the overall trade deal is being finalized and the legal text to that deal is being done, if your point is there, your interest will be taken care of. So I mean that is one which every industry, I mean all the industry should take note of going forward. We also talked about rules of origin. So I believe with my personal wisdom that even though there will not be a very high steep tariffs when we conclude the bilateral trade agreement with US, but the inkling is that US will be very strict on the rules of origin, and it will not be as simple as they are now between the India and other nations like which we have with ASEAN or we have with Australia, because in that there is a concept of CTH conversion, which is the HSN code conversion and some value add. But I believe that US knows that in Asia, the major supplier is China, and many of the goods are actually routed through many of these ASEAN nations to India and from there India to US. So it will try to make this the rules of origin very watertight. So and the way for the MSME exporters or the other exporters who would be willing to capitalize on the US trade India-US agreement going forward is to be very specific and knowledgeable about the rules of origin for your product and keep the documentation ready from now on so that you can satisfy the certificate giving authority as to whether your products has been substantially made or wholly originated in India. So that is one pointer which I could foresee from my perspective, because I remember that when the India-Australia agreement was signed and it has come into effect, many exporters now find themselves that for their initial few shipments, because of the non-documentation on their part, they could not take the benefit of the free trade agreement. So that is one sounder which I would like to give it to the industry. The third aspect which I want to highlight here is that we now have this incentive structure or the support structure in the name of ROTTEP, which is remission of duties on taxes and exported products. And since I was instrumental in kind of devising this scheme when I was there in the DGFT Ministry of Commerce headquarters, I would say that in the last 5 years, this policy and this concept of remitting these unremitted taxes has stabilized, and the rates have been enhanced also once. But in the last 1 year, we have come up with some new regulation. It is a compliance which the industry is required to do. So people who are aware, they might know that in October 2024, the DGFT came out with a notification saying that industries who have taken ROTTEP benefit per year of more than rupees 1 crore, they are supposed to file a ROTTEP return. So I would use this platform to again sensitize all the industry people who are listening to this that 30th June is the last date by which you are required to file this annual ROTTEP return. And mind you, if you are not able to file it, you might file it with some penalty till like 30th September. But if beyond that, and this is the period when the mud would have settled, the muddy waters would have settled, And if you have not filed, then you might see that your ROTTEP benefit you're not getting because your firm is now put in a list which has not submitted the ROTTEP return. So this slight reminder about the ROTTEP, and this data for submission of ROTTEP is also important because based on the data which you provide, we as government are able to first try to review our rates, whether the rates which we are giving to the industry are commensurate with the taxes which have already been paid by you. And second, such data also helps us in defending any countervailing measures which are being imposed by US or EU, for example. So, whereas it is good that the industry always likes to have some support, and we are giving it in whatever fiscal bandwidth which the government has, but that benefit comes with some compliance, and I would request the industry to file their annual ROTTEP return before 30th June. So these were about the structure, and I would also like to inform the stakeholders here that in the immediately after these trade negotiations are signed and kind of take effect, the DGFT and obviously the DGTS will again be doing all these taxpayer outreach programs. So please be keen on attending that, and again, if there are any other queries, please raise that issue to the Department of Commerce or the DGFT or the DGTS. Thank you. So I will close with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Praveen Kumar. Sir, Mr. Sumit Kumar.
Thank you so much to all the panelists and to the participants. I especially wish to thank FICCI and Grant Thornton Bharat. As my colleague from DGFT has mentioned, we are very much interested in having a program at the end of next month or in July, whenever this negotiations are concluded. We would also appreciate if FICCI and other trade bodies use this period to collect detailed information on both the tariff, non-tariff, and procedural issues. And as my colleague from DGFT has mentioned, whatever inputs you give us, whatever data you give us, as specific as possible would help us in designing a response. We want to reach out to the maximum number of exporters, to maximum number of industries. So along with general issues which affect all industries, sectoral issues also should be brought to our notice. And I look forward to having this event or a series of events in the end of June and July. With that, I again thank our partners, my own team, Grant Thornton Bharat, and all the participants who have attended this event. Thank you so much, and Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. On that note, on behalf of FICCI also, thank you very much for collaborating with us, sir, giving this opportunity to bring industry and other stakeholders, experts together on this platform, and we would continue, doing this, engagement on a regular basis. So thank you very much, and we'll close this session now. And anyone who has any query, please feel free to reach out to FICCI. We'll be able to, take this communication forward. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.